In 194, Your Eminence, why are the sacraments called actions of Christ?
The sacraments are called actions of Christ because through them, because Christ is the chief person acting in every sacrament.
Okay.
Even though Christ uses the human instrument, as we call it in theology, the human being who baptizes,
Yes.
whether generally a priest, but also those who are not priests can baptize in emergencies. Then the bishop who confers the sacrament of confirmation, or the priest in certain circumstances, the priest who celebrates the Holy Eucharist, and so on. All the sacraments, we have the human minister, as we call the person. But Christ is really the chief person acting. The human minister is an instrument of Christ, intelligent instrument whose action Christ has decided to need,
Yes.
to use. But Christ is the chief person acting. Then Christ gives his Holy Spirit to Christians to form them through the sacraments. And in the community of Christians, Christ is also the chief person leading them in the prayer. So later on we shall discuss sacred liturgy. And the chief person leading in the public worship of the church is also Christ. Therefore, it is very correct to say that the sacraments are actions of Christ. Without Christ, the sacraments would immediately lose not only their meaning, their existence.
So what a terrible loss to ignore the sacraments when they're a gift from God to give us these graces that we need to grow in his presence.
Christ already said, I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly.
Right.
And speaking of his body and blood in the Holy Eucharist, he says, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you will not have life in you.
Yes.
He also tells us the importance of the word. He said, the word I have spoken are spirit and they are life.
Yes.
So without Christ, there is no having life. He himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
And I think you're just going back to grace again, because sacraments give us grace, and I think it's so important that our people understand the two dimensions of grace. Actual grace, God's giving us the power, the strength to do his will in a certain set of circumstances, but sanctifying grace is what we receive from the sacraments, and that's God's presence in us. The more sanctifying grace we have, the more greater capacity we have to know, to love, and to glorify God in this world and in eternity.
Yes.
So it's his presence in us.
Through the sacraments, then, obviously, the sanctifying grace grows.
Right.
And for some sacraments like penance, reconciliation, for those in mortal sin who get forgiveness, they hadn't sanctifying grace before they received. Receiving it, they begin to have it again. But for most sacraments, the person must already have sanctifying grace. It grows.
Before its actions can take effect.
Yes. And obviously, each sacrament has what is called sacramental grace, the particular actual grace which that sacrament gives. When we take the sacraments one by one, we might touch those points.